Good evening, everyone, those joining us from the Eurasia, and good morning to the Washington, D.C. participants. Welcome to the regional virtual roundtable that aims to discuss the economic and financial consequences of the countries joining the Eurasian Economic Union. We think that it is very timely since we all remember that in July 2020, Uzbekistan announced joining the Eurasian Economic Union as the observer. We also remember that in July last year, Uzbekistan submitted the memorandum of the foreign trade to the WTO Secretariat, and in July of this year, the first round of negotiations were held. First, Uzbekistan is a big player with a population of the 33 million people. It is the half of the population of the Central Asian region. Uzbekistan also is the second largest economy of the Central Asia after Kazakhstan. Strategically, the Eurasian Economic Union needs these big players like Uzbekistan. At the same time, Uzbekistan has never been an easy player, and with an economy in transition from inward looking toward opening liberalization, still about 70% of the economy is driven by the state-owned enterprises, and the customs tariffs are the highest in the region. Therefore, Uzbekistan will unlikely to be an easy partner to negotiate its membership, given it's a big member. And finally, during the summer discussion of the heads of the states at the Eurasian Economic Union Strategy 2025, two other big partners and members of this Eurasian Economic Union voiced their concerns over the decision made in this union. And the question is whether the union needs an easy partner. So I will stop here and leave the floor to our experts, the panel members today. But before I give the floor to the panelists to present themselves, I want to figure out several technical issues. We plan that the seminar today will be about 2 hours. 1 hour, 40 minutes will be spent on the specific question I will ask our panelists, and we will have about 20 minutes allocated for the Q&A session. If you are interested to ask the question, please send your name, affiliation, and question to the chat, because only webinar participants or only panelists will be visible. The participants will not be visible, and I will voice your question after we are done with the main part. The language of the webinar is English. The interpretation into Uzbek and Russian will be provided, and if you want to choose Uzbek language, please choose Korean. This is an Uzbek language today. Then, yes, I think that's all from the technical part. I remind you that the plan of today's webinar is to discuss economic and financial consequences of the countries joining the Eurasian Economic Union. And now, with no further ado, I will give the floor to our panelists. I will allocate about 2 minutes to each of you to actually present yourself and briefly talk about the methodology of your research. On a separate note, I really want to thank panel members from Kyrgyzstan and Armenia for joining us today, given these challenges your countries are undergoing in this current situation. Thank you separately. And now let's move to the actual introduction. Kassymkhan Kapparov, would you please unmute yourself and talk briefly, present yourself, and talk about your paper very briefly. You have 2 minutes. Because we're restricted in time, I will have to, guys, stop you at a certain point if you talk too much. Thank you.
So Vladislav, if we could start with you, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Kalia. So my name is Vladislav Inozemtsev. I am a Russian economist who used to work and live in Russia for many years. I founded a special NGO in Moscow dedicated to futurology and digital divide and catching up development issues, which is called the Center for Post-Industrial Studies. In recent years, I'm a frequent visitor to the United States and Europe, being an associate with CSIS, the Center for Strategic International Studies in Washington, D.C. And I was asked actually to provide a text about Russia's position and Russian actually stands inside the Eurasian Economic Union. And so I don't have any specific methodology. I would say just for the beginning that my opinion, because I'm looking on these developments for more than 10 years so far. So my opinion is that Russia wants actually to use the Eurasian Union to somehow to fix its positions inside the post-Soviet space, to secure its dominant position in this area, using some kind of economic levers for purely political obstacles, I would say, because actually Russia is the biggest, by far the biggest participant of this group, and actually it cannot get a lot of purely economic benefits from participating in it. So from Russia's point of view, I think we should talk about the kind of exchange of trade-off of economic concessions for political loyalty of the countries involved. So therefore, this is actually the most important issue I want to address. As I see the Eurasian Union these days, it's not a kind of integration organization. It's just a trade bloc, a custom union, first of all, because if I will go into more details when I will present my paper, but anyway, if one goes into issues like mutual investments, the idea of, independent union authorities like like in the European Union, they actually doesn't exist, and I wouldn't expect much more from this Eurasian Union to be something except of this enhanced customs union for many years to come.
Do we continue here? And I see, for example, that Umida Khaknazar has joined us. I can ask her to present herself. In the meanwhile, while we're doing settling the technical issues, or how we do, Clear?
Yes, please proceed, Umida. Thank you.
Yes, Umida, I think you are, please represent yourself and talk briefly about.
Hello, everyone. Oh, I can hear my voice. So, I'm Umida Khaknazar from Uzbekistan. I'm a legal consultant, and in this research I prepared it together with my colleagues, Mr. Nishanbay Sirajiddinov, who is also present here, and Mr. Ziyodullo Parpiev. They're both economists, prominent economists in Uzbekistan, and my part was the legal part and non-tariff barriers, and as I'm mostly I've been working on trade policy issues in the region, in Uzbekistan, in Central Asian countries, WTO accession process as well. So our task was basically to look at what could be possible consequences or implications for Uzbekistan from joining to the Eurasian Economic Union, especially in the context of ongoing process of accession to WTO. Our overall, the methodology was straightforward comparative analysis, because for the economic assessment of tariffs part, we could not use widely accepted model of general equilibrium, simply due to lack of data and statistics in Uzbekistan. So we just looked at basically comparing overall, sort of descriptive kind of more even comparison of existing agreements within the Eurasian Economic Union and existing tariffs in terms of tariffs. So we looked at all those four freedom sectors, basically freedom of goods, freedom of movement for goods, services, capital, and labor. And of course, in between, there were some subsectors. My part was on non-tariff barriers, including traditional NTBs and plus STS-TBT. and part of services also. And my colleagues were doing the heavy lifting, basically, of assessing the differences in tariff policy and excise taxation. So our major overall conclusion was that obviously it would be rational for Uzbekistan to join the WTO, as all of the members of the Eurasian Economic Union are members of the WTO and actually joined it prior to Eurasian Economic Union, except for Kazakhstan, which had this sort of contemporaneously, which caused a lot of exemptions in the tariffs. We know over 2,400 exemptions, and there's from listening to introductory note of our colleague from Russia, we can agree that our conclusion are quite the same, that basically it's not quite yet really economic union in the economic theory sense, basically, and there are no four freedoms yet. Even the first freedom is quite disputable, and there's still many exemptions, and there's no really freedom of movement of goods even. Forget about other, aspects. So this is very, very overall introduction, and the next questions we can go into details. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Umida. I just want to make a note that on the paper that prepared on Uzbekistan, Umida was joined by the team of economists and Nishanbay, Sirajiddinov, principal lecturer of international economics at the University of Languages and Diplomacy, Yuliy Yusupov, director of Center for Economic Development Uzbekistan, and Ziyodullo Parpiev, principal lecturer in economics at Westminster International University of Tashkent. They also present today and will be available for comments if you have any questions as well. Then let us move on and I don't know if Kassymkhan was able to set up his sound.
Yes, I think I could.
Great, thank you. Then would you please present yourself and talk briefly about your paper?
Okay, thank you. My name is Kassymkhan Kapparov. I'm not sure if this was the sound okay before. I'm a managing partner of the Economics and Management Consulting Group. We are the group that's based in Almaty, Kazakhstan.
Consulting Group.
And we are on mostly Kazakhstan and the region and Central Asia. So basically our research was focused more on the experience on the case of Kazakhstan's joining first customs union and later on the Eurasian Economic Union. And we tried to analyze what was the unique circumstances for Kazakhstan and what are the maybe universal things that could be of use for other countries who are planning to join this union. Just in a nutshell, I would say that the experience of Kazakhstan is quite unique because we were moving at the same time looking at joining two unions. One is regional Eurasian Economic Union and the other one is global WTO. So there were some hiccups on the way that I would present later. On the other side, one thing I want to mention is the communication during this joining process, namely communication from the government towards business community and the population, and how the government was managing it, successful or not very successfully in translating these pros and cons of joining this union to the general population. I think that's one of the lessons that also can be learned from Kazakhstan's case. Thank you.
Thank you. We will move on to Mr. Vahagn Khachatryan, who I see here. Could you please present yourself and talk about your findings?
Yes. First of all, my name is Vahagn Khachatryan. I'm an Armenian economist. I'm a liberal Armenian economist. Sometimes it's very difficult to be liberal, but I listen to Vladimir Inozemtsev, I am very happy to listen to you because I know you very well. And I many times spent read through your books, articles. Thanks very much for it. And thanks to all of you organizers this meeting, because we work about 10 months and nobody knows. We understand that it's very difficult working with this situation, but thanks to organize for this meeting. And I hope that our work today will be effective and will all the able go to get the expected results. Our work is dedicated to the membership of the Republic of Armenia in the Eurasian Union. It took place in special situation, which was somewhat unexpected for the society. Until 3-4 years, Armenia has been intensively preparing for the cessation to the initiated to European Union program of the Eastern Partnership. It predicts deeper political and economic cooperation with the former 6 countries of the USSR, including Armenia. In September 30 of 2013, in Moscow, heads of state, Russia and Armenia, Vladimir Putin and Sargsyan, agreed to the membership of Armenia in the Customs Union, then Eurasian Union. As a result, Armenia became full member of the Eurasian Union in January 2015. The work presents the results, works, and cases done in the past 5 years to integrate the economies of the member countries of the Union, the impact of economy of the Republic of Armenia, the ways of participating in the works, the participants, the prospect of union, the objectives to development. The necessary information base for the work was the official publication related to the Eurasian Union, the analysis made by domestic and foreign specialists, the publications, as well as the publications of official statistical data, reports of international organizations. The works use statistical, comparative, grouping, analysis, and summarization methods. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And we are moving to the last member of the panel, representing Kyrgyzstan here, Kubanychbek Sagaliev. Mr. Sagaliev, could you please then present yourself?
Okay. Hello everyone. My name is Kubanychbek Sagaliev, and I'm representing Kyrgyz Republic. I'm the director of local consulting firm named Bishkek Consulting Group, Beyond Investment Group, and with respect to the research. Talking about the research, the methodology consists of the 3 main parts. First of all, it is a desktop review of all statistical data, and second one, it's talking the real sector representatives. It's a large firms operating in the Kyrgyzstan, and also SME representatives. And the last one is direct person-to-person meetings and discussion with government officials. In our research, we covered all 4 main questions, and we tried to cover all of them. And the main parts of the paper includes transition period, custom rates, transitions, about the development fund organized by Russian Federation for the transition period. And that's it. And for these 4 main questions, I will talk in detail separately based on this agenda. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. And I know that participants of the event received your papers yesterday together with the registration, so they will be able to read the papers of each of you in details. And I really enjoyed reading those and learned a lot. It's a lot of work you've done. At the same time, we as AmCham also did a survey of our members back in June 2020 on the to understand the perception of the business community on Uzbekistan joining the Eurasian Economic Union. And it's worth mentioning that the membership of the American Chamber of Commerce I work for is diverse, and we represent all kind of business. It's biggest investors to Uzbekistan, and it's also small local companies. So the survey was quite representative with 100 responses we received. It represents all kinds of business, starting from in the consulting and the business sectors, in the trade, construction, tourism, healthcare, education, and even art. And also it represents all kinds of business, all sizes of business. We are talking about the annual turnover from $10,000 US dollars to $20 million US dollars a year. And the number of employees varying from 5 people to 2,500 people. So I'm not going to take a lot of your time to and briefly represent 3 main findings of our research. The first, first, that in general, the business community of Uzbekistan perceives Uzbekistan accession to Eurasian Economic Union as positive rather than negative, and they have 3 main expectations from this union. It's improvement of the terms of trade, its availability of skilled labor, and it is eradication of the corruption and the red tape. And I'm going to talk about these 3 main topics just for the next 2 minutes. We all know that that the main concern of the business community is the lack of the skilled labor. We are talking about the engineers and scientists in the different spheres. So if Uzbekistan joins the customs union, the business thinks that the availability of those skilled labor from the members of the customs union would be easier to get and actually more cheaper. So they expect this free movement of labor that assumes by the integration. In terms of the trade regime, they think that harmonization of the customs tariffs and basically eradication of this excessive tariffs Uzbekistan is experiencing now will make it cheaper and shorter to move goods within this customs union. And finally, very surprisingly, the business community thinks that joining the Eurasian Economic Union will settle their problems of the corruption, especially at the local government level they're experiencing, and the red tape they're experiencing at the central government level. So the conclusion from our survey is that the business community is more positive toward Uzbekistan joining the Eurasian Economic Union, but also that the awareness of the business community about the procedures and the rules and how the rules of the game will change is also very vague, because we as a business community are not aware of any campaigns or education campaigns the government, the related agencies do with the business community. Possibly it's because we are still joining as an observer in there is time, but the understanding from the survey that like business community doesn't clearly see the benefits or the disadvantages, because they just expect that the business will become easy, doing business will become easy. So that was briefly about our survey, and it's also attached to those participants who registered. Now I will move to the first question to our panelists. And in the integration theory, it's stated that the first reason for the integration should be an economic reason. So countries integrating should expect increased trade, and the contribution to the economy should also be increased at least like by 4% of the annual GDP. We also know that usually the biggest member of the union should benefit economically most. Therefore, my first question goes to Vladislav and Inozemtsev, because Russia is the biggest economy of the Eurasian Economic Union. Could you please tell us on how Russia benefited from the creation of this economic union, and about trade turnover, the composition of export and import, and about economic benefits of the participation in this trade union? Thank you.
Look, actually, my main point in my paper was actually a little bit opposite to what you said just now, because I do not agree completely that the biggest member gets the most, the larger part of benefits. Because if you look, for example, on many integration efforts, for example, first of all, European Union or North America Free Trade Organization Association when it was established in 1994, in both cases, I would say the weakest members of this alliance benefit the most. For example, in Europe, we saw that the Mediterranean members, which were by far not the most important members of the European Union, like Spain and Portugal and even Greece, which joined in 1980, were the most successful countries which benefited the most. For example, Greece that joined in 1980, it improved its per capita GDP grew from around 68-69% of European Union average to 94 by 2006. And the terms of trade, the terms of access to the loans, the yields on the loans went down, and this was a huge success for Mediterranean countries. In NAFTA, of course, Mexico was the largest country which benefited the most because of the increase of exports to the United States. So in Russian case, I would say Russia didn't benefit a lot from the Eurasian Union establishment. And even Mr. Putin said in 2011 in his famous article about the Eurasian Union that it should produce around 20% of additional GDP growth in coming 10 years. It didn't make so this result, didn't produce this result. Moreover, if you look on different parts or sectors of trade between Russia and other Eurasian Union members, it is rather not so big, I would say. Russia runs huge trade surpluses with all of them because it exports, first of all, its oil and gas or energy resources to major countries like Belarus or Armenia. Only a little bit more than 11% of all Russian trade is conducted between Russia and all other Eurasian Union members combined, while, for example, less than 2% of Russian investment, which Russian capital, which is used for outward FDI, is put to Eurasian Union countries members. So if you look on some sectoral elements of the trade, I think the most important, the biggest share in Russia, which Eurasian Union countries products has, is Belarusian dairy products, which encompasses around 8% of the Russian dairy market. But this is a huge exception. If you look on the Russian, if you are in in the Russian shop anywhere in Russia, you cannot see any kind of product except of some Belarusian goods, because the Russian market is very huge. For example, if you look on Germany, Germany accounts for around 18%, 17-18% of the European Union combined GDP, while Russia accounts for around 86.5% of the GDP of Eurasian Union. So therefore, I would say for Russia, as I stated before, for Russia, it's mostly exchanging of some kind of economic concessions, because Russia actually opens its market for Eurasian Union member states, except of the energy products, of course. So it exchanges some kind of economic access to its huge market for kind of political influence, or rather maybe not real political influence, but mostly the imaginary political influence over the post-Soviet space. So therefore, I would say that I cannot actually find out any huge any huge benefits for Russia from creation of the Eurasian Union. Maybe there are some kinds of, you know, more openness with the same kind of countries like Belarus, but anyway, many hopes and expectations that were present in 2012 and 2013 as the Eurasian Union took shape, they actually evaporated because some of the Russian entrepreneurs dreamed of switching their companies to Kazakh jurisdiction because of the lower taxes, and this actually went bust because it's a lot of problems in Russia if you operate a Kazakh company inside Russia. The idea of creating, you know, a single market of goods actually was undermined by the problems of transiting. And so, for example, if some Kazakh company wants to buy some goods from either Poland or Ukraine, it's a huge problem with shipping it through Russia because of the regime of sanctions. And the most important issue, I would say, is that the Eurasian Union took shape starting from 2013 or even 2014. And this is the time when Russia started to, I would say, to close itself from the outer world. And the European and American sanctions were imposed, the Russian counter-sanctions were also in place, have been in place since 2014. And so, as I think you, Tatyana, said, that Uzbekistan is now looking for, you know, opening itself to, so for outward expansion or for outward-looking approach. Russia is definitely going the opposite direction. It's inward-looking. The most celebrated programs in the country are the so-called import substitution. Russian market is closing from competition from different countries. So therefore, I would say that I wouldn't say there is a complete contradiction, a conflict between joining the WTO these days and joining the Eurasian Union. But in any case, I cannot actually imagine how big the benefits from Eurasian Economic Union may be. It's not, I would say nothing against it, actually, because of course, if Uzbekistan joins and it becomes a new member, definitely the Russian position will be very favorable for it, because once again, I repeat, it's mostly a political enterprise. So if Uzbekistan joins, Russia will definitely provide some additional, you know, exceptions from the existing rules, and it will attract Uzbekistan and will actually make everything for Uzbek colleagues to make themselves quite comfortable with this union. But nevertheless, it cannot offer too much, I would say.
Thank you so much. You actually even look ahead and partially answered to my two next questions about the business community. But it was really very profound, and we understood that even the biggest partners didn't benefit from the economic union. So now we move to the second big economy of the Eurasian Economic Union, which is Kazakhstan. And Kassymkhan, if you could please tell us about how the trade balance of Kazakhstan changed since it's joined the Eurasian Economic Union, and we also understand that that not all members of the Eurasian Union are the biggest trade partners of Kazakhstan. We would really want to hear about this situation from you, and you have 5 minutes. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Let me join my colleague Vladislav in his opinion that this union was not, at this point, is still not very beneficial to Kazakhstan as well. Let me tell some points why I came up with this conclusion. So first of all, we're talking about the tariff levels that Kazakhstan's government has been decreasing gradually since year 2000. That was the one of the main policies towards joining WTO to gradually prepare the economy. And then once the Kazakhstan joined the customs union and later on the Eurasian Economic Union, we had to adjust tariff levels to the levels mostly of Russia, which was a member of WTO. And in general, we could say that the tariff rose almost twice from 6% in 2009 prior to joining customs union to the highest 11.4% in 2012. So from this standpoint, of course, the economy was affected. The prices for cars, household appliances, clothes, footwear that was mostly imported from China, Turkey, or Western Europe, the price has increased significantly for the economy. This is also can be explained by the structure of the economy of Kazakhstan. And in this sense, we are very close to Russia in terms of the structure of the economy, but the oil sector is even more significant relatively to the economy in Kazakhstan. So when we talk about the trade balance, Kazakhstan exports a lot of raw materials, up to 80% of it exports, and imports ready-made goods and equipment and technology. So within the union, number one trade partner for us, for Kazakhstan, of course, is Russia. But the benefits, if we could analyze the trade balance, so we cannot see the direct benefit from after joining the union, because the trade balance with the largest trade partner, Russia, hasn't changed much. As of last year, it was still in the deficit. So Kazakhstan exported up to $6 billion volume and imported up to $13 billion from Russia. So net deficit was around $9 billion. And this is the largest trade deficit within this union. So in this sense, Kazakhstan is not benefiting from trade directly. On the other hand, we can see that the trade is growing within of Kazakhstan with the union members. In the last 10 years, it grew by 13%, up to $20 billion. But this trade is very volatile, and it's mainly driven by the prices on mineral resources rather than by increased economic activity among union players. So in case of Kazakhstan, it's very hard to see the real impact of the union on the intra-regional trade. Of course, we understand that the Kazakhstan's economy is not that big to use the economy of scale in order to gain real advantages and enter at least Russian market, which is 10 times more. And that was the main hope behind government joining this union, and that was the main idea translated to the business community in Kazakhstan. And when it didn't realize, of course, there was a lot of double thoughts, second thoughts from the business community. And I will talk more about the non-tariff barriers later on. Thank you.
Thank you so much. My next question goes to Mr. Khachatryan, because it seems that Armenia was one of these few members of the Eurasian Union that was able to actually export value-added goods, not only like raw material, like energy, but you were able to export some goods to like Russia, like your cognac or all the luxury segment goods. Would you please elaborate on this and talk about the trade balance and trade and composition, the structure of trade with the members of the Eurasian Union? Thank you. And you have 5 minutes. And we cannot hear you.
I forget. Thank you, Tatyana. The story of Armenia became a Eurasian Union is very interesting, because before became a member of the Custom Union, Armenia during 4 or 5 years or 3 or 4 years do very hard work with European Union for the program of Eastern Partnership, became a member of this organization, but then he changed his mind in 2013. The decision of the Armenians to join the Eurasian Union was not only economically, but also politically, and above maintained a prorated safety. Objectively, Armenia could not act on the other side. On the other hand, it could not resolve its political and economic relation with Russia. It's a real economy and real political situation in Armenia. Why is changing? Why the former president Sargsyan changed his mind in the 3rd of September 2013? Analyzing the economies of Armenia with points of integration processes, we note the following characteristic features. First, exclusiveness in relation to the Eurasian Union. Armenia does not have a land border with any of the Union countries. In the factual economic blockaded with Turkish and Azerbaijan. The second, strong dependence on Russia. Third, small volumes of trade with other UAE members except Russia. For example, Armenia export of Armenia, for example, to Russia is about 28% of the full exports. Belarus 0.7%, to Kazakhstan 0.2%, Kyrgyzstan to 0.1%. Significant shares of remittance from labor migrants and the diaspora, 15% of GDP in 2015. And fifth, thanks to World Trade Organization membership, there were significantly low customs tariffs with third countries in comparison with other custom union countries. And structural differences of the economy comparative to all production Russia and Kazakhstan. Priority to join to Union, there was a fairly liberal custom regime in Armenia. Import rates were 5–10%. After joining, another procedure was introduced which provided for a differentiated approach, as a result of which the average entry rate increased 2.7 times. At the same time, local producers gained an advantage in exporting goods and services to EIA member states, which increased their competitiveness. Export of beverages, agricultural products, precious stones increased significantly as a result of the integration, light industry, agriculture processing of agriculture products, high technology appeared in more favorable conditions. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Yeah, we see that Armenia, in case of Armenia actually benefited from the joining the Eurasian Economic Union. Now we want to listen to hear from another, let's say, small member of the Eurasian of the trade union, of the customs union, Kyrgyzstan. Kubanychbek, can I please ask you to elaborate on this for 5 minutes?
Okay, thank you, Tatyana. With respect to the trade balance, actually, Kyrgyzstan trade balance after joining this Eurasian Economic Union has increased. It is around 3 and 4%. But nevertheless, there's an interesting point I want to mention. With regard to this, before joining this union, Kazakhstan was known and was well known for its being the re-export hub of the Central Asia, because we had, before joining the union, had very low custom rates for imports. And our country mainly consisted, was famous for being like buy and sell country, like bazaar economy, simple bazaar economy. But the positive effect of the joining the economic union, all the rules and regulations of the union made all businesses turn from the bazaar economy to production and processing economy. So it means that Kyrgyzstan has begun being and transforming to processing and production. But nevertheless, notwithstanding these positive effects, Kyrgyzstan, frankly saying, was not ready to the requirements of the union. For example, Kyrgyzstan, before joining the economic union, Eurasian Economic Union, was exporting its raw materials, especially agricultural products, to main partner. It's firstly Russia and second Kazakhstan. But after joining, Kyrgyzstan had many requirements, like technical regulations in Russian технический регламент. For these kind of requirements and conditions, most of our business were not ready. So it was like an obstacle for our businesses. But to be honest, it is, from one point of view, it is good, because it is like challenge for our businesses, for Kyrgyzstan business people. So, but again, another interesting point is my colleague from Armenia, Mr. Khachatryan, mentioned. It's like more political processes, because it's for a long time Kyrgyzstan was one of the for Kyrgyzstan, Russia and Kazakhstan was main trade partners. So joining this Eurasian Economic Union was like a formality. So it's this end for my first question.
Thank you so much. And now we are moving to Umida. Given that Russia and Kazakhstan are in the top 3 trade partners of Uzbekistan for many years already, and given that there is a free trade agreement between the former CIS countries on the free move of reduced tariffs on the internal trade, what is the benefits of Uzbekistan joining the Eurasian Economic Union then, and how the trade will change if Uzbekistan joins? And does it make sense at all economically? Umida, sound.
Yeah, yes, thank you. Yes, as you mentioned, for trade in goods within the EIU, since Uzbekistan, as you mentioned, has been a member for many years to the CIS Free Trade Agreement. So most goods are subject to zero tariff anyway. So with the exception of the fact that excise taxes are applied in a discriminatory way to many imports. So otherwise, in terms of tariffs, it's a free trade agreement, right? So the question is, there is not much expectation that the status quo will significantly change. So therefore, in terms of goods, the main concern is a possible change in tariffs for third country imports, and whether discriminatory excise taxes will be removed. So that's a main question that we raised, and that would may have an impact for trade balance and trade relations. And by the way, removal of a discriminatory excise taxes is a requirement under all agreements, CIS agreement and under WTO process and under EAU, Eurasian Economic Union. So for imports from third countries, it was established that for a large group of HS codes, such as heavy industry equipment or technological equipment, telecom products, etc., the rates of Uzbekistan, bound rates, would have to be raised to the level of Eurasian Economic Union, which means basically trade diversion, since imports would mainly be from the Economic Union, mainly Russia. And at the same time, for a certain group of imported goods, such as automobiles, electric appliances, food products, cosmetics, medical equipment, etc., medicine, which we broadly call consumer goods. Uzbekistan applies and has been practicing discriminatory excise taxes for a number of years, and used to be over 2,000 HS codes compared to less than 200 domestic products applied before, but now they reduced it significantly, but still it's substantial. So which effectively are hidden tariffs, basically excise taxes. So import duties combined with excise taxes bound rates are higher than those of the Eurasian Economic Union for a certain group of consumer goods, which is obviously if the assumption is that if after joining if discriminatory excise tax is removed and bound rates reduced, it will be good news in terms of reducing the role of monopolies and state trading enterprises in Uzbekistan. But whether or not there will be sudden surge in imports from third countries for such products that following reduction and removal of discriminatory excise taxes, it would probably be premature to assume that they will immediately jump, since we cannot ignore a substantial informal market of imports of consumer goods imported without customs classification. That's been going on since mid-90s, so it's probably premature to expect sudden surge of imports from third countries. But it's a speculation, of course, but just like with other Kazakhstan and Kyrgyzstan, there's also been an informal market, but probably not as in Uzbekistan, it's been quite significant. In the context of the WTO accession process, it's not convenient to rely, we believe that it's not convenient to rely on Eurasian Economic Union bound tariffs as reference points in the negotiation process, since it significantly reduces bargaining power of Uzbekistan within the WTO. If Uzbekistan negotiates something similar to Kazakhstan's exemptions, over 2,400 exemptions have been negotiated from Eurasian Economic External Tariff, then the rules of origin for internal movement of goods will be still significant then, which undermines the freedom of movement of goods principle. So that's what expectation of businesses, that business will be easier to do, that goods will be easier to move, to transport, sort of is being compromised, because if the rules of origin are still a matter within the member states, then we'll have border checks, we have all the delays just as usual. So these are, of course, at this point, a little bit speculation still, because nothing is still clear, neither on WTO bilateral negotiations, because they just started, nor in the Eurasian Economic Union negotiations so far. Whether there is a political will or decision on part of Uzbekistan to remove discriminatory excise taxes that will have an impact if they removed, will be clear by December 2020, I think, which is like in a couple of months, because this is the deadline even for the CIS free trade agreement. CIS free trade agreement also has a provision that Uzbekistan took a commitment back in 2011 to remove discriminatory excise taxes, as well as some other, and comply with some of the international standards, just like other members of the Eurasian Economic Union, CIS agreement. So that's
I think Umida also touched the second question I had on the barriers to trade, tariff and non-tariff, and then yes, but then we'll go we will consider that you answered the second question, and we'll go on the other.
The non-tariffs I didn't touch yet.
Okay.
It's only tariffs.
Okay, good. But then actually that was my second question, and maybe we then start with you, and we'll just continue, and then we will move to another panelist. If you briefly talk about non-tariff barriers to trade, and then it seems that both Eurasian Economic Union and WTO has similar requirements to the tariff regulations, and then in this case, when we see that of the current Eurasian Economic Union, almost all, with an exception of Kazakhstan and Belarus, all other members were able to have been the WTO members prior to joining the Eurasian Union. What would be the most plausible or positive scenario for Uzbekistan to join the WTO first and then join the Eurasian Economic Union, or vice versa?
Mm-hmm. So for non-tariff barriers, of course, this is a very broad topic. So since considering constrained time, I would probably focus more on, focus more on most maybe very actual for Uzbekistan topical areas where non-tariff barriers such as SPS, TBT, since Uzbekistan is a producer and exporter of horticulture products, for example, to Eurasian Economic Union member states and to Russia, especially Kazakhstan, like fruits and vegetables, and it's an agriculture strategy developments to diversify exports and production of horticulture products. So SPS becomes very important, of course, within that, and there are certain expectations and assumptions that exports will rise and increase and diversify and ease, etc. So under the CIS Free Trade Agreement, Uzbekistan committed also to harmonize its SPS TBT systems and to comply with WTO SPS and TBT by the end of 2020, but it hasn't happened. And the same as with WTO accession process, obviously it has to bring into compliance. I must say that compared to all other member states, Uzbekistan SPS and TBT systems are quite underdeveloped at a rudimentary stage. Maybe it has to do with the fact that over the past 30 years, Uzbekistan hasn't been really trading well and has been isolated sort of from international standards, let's say, yeah. So Eurasian Economic Union SPS and TBT agreements are based on WTO SPS primarily principles in most part, although there are some differences and not all technical regulations and SPS measures on the Eurasian Economic Union are fully harmonized with international standards like Codex, OIE, and IPPC. However, it's still more WTO based, of course, compared to Uzbekistan. So therefore, Uzbekistan will still need to do its homework, you know, of reforming the SPS and TBT systems. Here I can refer to my colleague from Kyrgyzstan who said that on the one hand, it's good that for Kyrgyzstan that it had to kind of, you know, comply and change and make some reforms to move closer, you know, to international standards. And maybe that's also the same argument for us, that maybe it's good, so at least something we have to start doing, you know. But for example, on food safety, Uzbekistan not only restricted imports over the past like 20 years, but also banned exports, which is quite paradoxical, on food products, on animal origins, for example, meat and milk products. So Uzbekistan has been, as I said, isolated from international standards, and legislation is not risk-based, no harmonized, institutions are fragmented, huge overlap at the same of functions, at the same time many loopholes, so no control over very important agricultural inputs like use and sale of pesticides, wet drugs, animal feed, and fertilizers, something which is very important for exports of horticulture products, you know, especially if we're talking to exports to EU member states or some developed countries. They really look at this residual levels, you know, MRLs, you know, according to Codex, and there's no really effective inspection of food operators and no modernization of labs. There is no single lab that is internationally accredited. Uzbekistan is not a member to ILAC, which is International Laboratory Accreditation Corporation. So, and of course, all these best practices like from farm to table, GMP, GHP, HASP, it's never been introduced, etc., etc. So on TBT, there's a huge conflict of interest because we still have standards agency that combines all these functions, you know, certification, accreditation, standardization, technical regulation, and some of the still focused on end product certification rather than new approach of process-based, risk-based, you know, control. So we can basically conclude, to put it shortly, that under the EIU, for exporting to Eurasian Economic Member States, like labs must be included into the list of the Eurasian Economic Union labs. like food enterprises that produce products for export, they must be included into the register of EAU, you know, and they have to comply with HASP and many other things, and they would be subject to inspections from veterinaries from Russia or Kazakhstan or whatever member states. So, and at the same time, there are problems with the EU legislation as well, because there is no reliable enforcement on the Eurasian Economic Union regulations at the national level. So there is a risk that there may be different rules within different member states in terms of actually border checks even, you know. So no really unified policy. All the agreement is the same, principles apply the same, but enforcement level, there is a two-tier kind of level of regulation. So as for imports, what the expectations is that, of course, there may be increase in imports of processed foods, like processed meat and milk products from Belarus, Kazakhstan, Russia, Kyrgyzstan, you know. We can say maybe there is assumption, of course, that it will be good for competition in Uzbekistan, you know, so that it will kind of stimulate local producers to make better products. But the question is how reform will go for domestic systems. If reform do not really progress on these issues, then the competition will not be even possible, because even importers would have to deal with the national level enforcement level. So it depends on how the domestically, you know, the reforms will move. Therefore, it's kind of I would agree that this is the area which is least developed in Uzbekistan, probably least sort of backwards compared to all the Eurasian economic member states, and definitely the Eurasian Economic Union agreements and regulations are much more WTO based and international standards based, of course, than Uzbekistan. And on the one hand, it's a good thing to force, you know, domestic reforms. But whether or not there will be domestic reforms, that's a question, because this is a shortcoming of the Eurasian Economic Union regulations and a system that it's a two-level regulation, a two-tier kind of enforcement, and it all goes to enforcement, all lies within the national level. So there is a risk that member states will not have political power, you know, to force Uzbekistan to do the domestic reforms, basically. So, of course, from the practical, and just your last point, from the practical point of view, of course, it would be much more rational to join WTO, because within the WTO commitments, there is much more more pressure, you know, to do their domestic reforms.
Thank you, Umida. And then you mentioned this expert of agricultural and the requirements. I wanted to ask the Kubanychbek to elaborate on this, because in this paper I saw that when Kyrgyzstan joined the Eurasian Economic Union, the Russia somehow assisted with the laboratories, so you were able to catch up as an expert of the agricultural products to Russia. In addition, Kyrgyzstan along with Armenia were the earliest members of WTO, so I think the negotiation of the non-trade and non-tariff and tariff barriers to trade were smoother and quicker. Could you please briefly talk about this? 4 minutes you have.
Thank you, Tatyana. Talking about the Kyrgyzstan, about this being prepared for the union, is as follows. In the beginning of our webinar, my colleague from Kazakhstan, Mr. Kassymkhan, told that the main part of joining the process was communication and negotiations. It's the key part of entering this union. And you know, interesting part of the process was not. It's like opposite from Uzbekistan, as you told before, that our business associations, more specified business association, almost all business associations were challenging the government in order that government conducted these informative campaigns around for the whole country. So in Kyrgyzstan, particularly, the government was really working hard in order to make clear information about the joining, about the peculiarities, about differentiation of being the member of the union. Talking about these tariff and non-tariff barriers, I want to again mention that Kyrgyzstan was not prepared for being the member, because it was more like our economy was like only procuring the main trade partner Russia and Kazakhstan with the raw materials, and mostly was re-exporting all the goods coming from China. But after joining the union, customs rates were increased significantly for our country, and after that Kyrgyzstan had no chance. It had only chance to make its own production and to make own processing direction for the businesses. So having this kind of reorientation of the business, it was like going from bazaar economy to this processing and production economy. There is, I want to mention one point, that Kyrgyzstan had transition period for certain goods and for certain goods and materials. Like even if, for example, there are lots of many products and goods and materials that are not produced in Kyrgyzstan. For such kind of products, Kyrgyzstan had a transition period for 3 years, 4 years, and for 5 years. And also these technical requirements in Russian technical regulamen. Most of the business were not ready for it. So Kyrgyzstan, until now, they have been witnessing, all the businesses have been witnessing these kind of obstacles while making trades with Kazakhstan, with Russia, with Belarus, because all the goods procured from Kyrgyzstan are not in compliance with this kind of requirements, with Eurasian Economic Union requirements. Another thing, it is unofficially, I heard from many businesses, many small businesses, many large businesses, there is unofficially, there are lots of barriers from Russian side, from Kazakhstan side. Like, you know, that every country wants to have its own pie. And the same with respect to this Kyrgyzstan produced processed goods, there is like a unofficial barriers entering these goods into these large markets like Russia and Kazakhstan. So that's it.
Thank you so much. I think we will move on to the on this barriers to trade and barriers to trade and WTO accession to the next panel member, Mr. Khachatryan. If you could please tell us on the process of accession, because I know that Armenia also was the member of WTO when you joined, and you were not actually going to join the Eurasian Economic Union. So your barriers to trade were much lower comparing to that within the Eurasian Economic Union. How did you negotiate this?
Tatyana, thank you. You are right. Armenia became a member of WTO 2003, 70 years. It's oldest member of this union members. It's very, when Armenia decided became the Eurasian Union, one of the main questions, what we'll do in this situation, because Armenia, I introduced you, that was the Armenian trade regime was very liberal, more liberal regime, and import tariff was about 5, maximum 10%. But after the became of the Eurasian Union, we understand that tariffs will be increased, and after them the situation in economic situation will be changed, because the we're thinking about inflation, about rising the price of the goods and some other things, and it was very difficult. It was a very difficult situation in that time. I mean, 5 years ago, when we discussing with experts, with politicals, what will do Armenia doing with this situation, because we have a special agreement with WTO that we will our tariffs will never be changed. But during these 5 years, we haven't any problem with WTO until now. I can't say about after, because when I spoke with the officials from Eurasian Commissions, they asked me that they have a special union, Eurasian Union have a special agreement with WTO, and they discussion about this situation. If Armenians deciding raising his sum of tariffs of some of goods, there will be discussion with officials from WTO. And after then, Armenia and maybe not only Armenia and officials from Eurasian Union, we decided what they shall do. It is they asked me this, when I asked the question, they answered me this. This is the situation. And in this situation, Armenia now have a special agreement with Eurasian Union that during 5 years, I mean from 2015 until 2020, certain goods could be imported to the Armenian under the same conditions it was before. And there was also a list of tariff preferences and exceptions from the Eurasian Commission. That is list of goods that will be important at lower or higher rates for a certain number of years. And rates of import custom duties, which are comfortable for Armenia, will retain for such commodity goods, groups of motor vehicles and vehicles, food products, pharmaceutics, oil products, and other things. In terms of technical regulation, it's very important for Armenia too. A rule was enforced during the year according to which Armenian entrepreneurs received the right to choose to work either in accordance with the legislation of the Eurasian Union or in accordance with the national legislation. It was a very difficult problem in that time, but they, after some discussion between entrepreneurs from Armenia and officials from Eurasian Union, they agreed that it will be worked with this. I explained you. And other question was very important for Armenia is the labor migrants problem, because I introduced you that about 15% of remittance coming from 15% remittance of GDP, and mostly of them coming from Russia. And Armenian citizens without any restrictions could work on the territory of the entire Union, as well as stay in the territory of Eurasian Union countries for 30 days without registration under a labor agreement. But now this restriction has now been lifted. It means that Armenian workers can work in any countries of Eurasian Union, how many days they want, and how it's no problem. It's the same situation if they decided to work in Armenia. It's very important for, I think it will be very important for Uzbekistan and Kyrgyzstan, because I know that many of migrants work in Russia from their countries too.
Yeah, thank you. I think it's the situation with migrant workers and the number of remittances they remit to the economy of our countries is huge, be it the share of the GDP or the in absolute terms. And yes, the migrant workers is the biggest reason for most of the countries to join the Eurasian Economic Union. However, we move on, and now we have two big economies to answer the question on the tariffs and non-tariffs. It's Kazakhstan and actually Russia, and also we learned from the first question that the composition of the export of goods is almost the same. My question to Vladislav and Inozemtsev on how Russia was negotiating those or imposing those tariff and non-tariff barriers to trade to other members of the Union. Please, could you comment?
Look, the Russian case is quite unique here because, as everybody before stated already, that the Russian tariffs were higher than the most of the countries who were previously WTO members. So therefore, actually, Russia didn't negotiate, I would say, something like this. It just stated that it will apply the same kind of tariffs, maybe a little bit lower than before, than there were to all other countries, and of course all other members of the of the Eurasian Union agreed to join quite willingly, and as they understood that the tariffs will rise. But nevertheless, they, as I believe, they calculated that other preferences that the membership can offer will outweigh this tariff hike. The problem with the tariffs and non-tariff regulation is actually that the bodies, the collective bodies of the Eurasian Union are quite weak. And as Umida once mentioned, the decision-making process is not so efficient and is not so independent as, for example, in the European Union, because even the court of the Eurasian Union has only the possibility to, to draft some decisions which doesn't have any immediate power to be implemented. It's just a kind of recommendation, nothing else. And therefore, actually, the Commission of the Eurasian Union is also not very powerful if compared, for example, to the European Commission, because every important decision should be made by the consensus between the heads of state and all the governments of the European Union, of the Eurasian Union. So therefore, it's not a very effective mechanism, actually. So, and what I also want to mention here is that in Russia, the technical standards, as our Kyrgyz colleague mentioned, they actually are not very advanced compared to the European ones and even to the Chinese. So therefore, the Russian market, to adopt to the Russian market, you should actually a little bit, downgrade your own requirements. And it was a huge case with Kazakhstan, because many requirements that Kazakhstan had at the start, at the time it joined the Eurasian Union, were actually the same as the European Union, and it creates a lot of problems. Moreover, I would also say that actually the problem with the Eurasian Union counter-economies is that most of them, I think, only except of Kyrgyz and maybe Armenian economy, they have a very huge presence of a state sector. In Russia, it's around 65 to 70% of the state sector presence in the economy. In Belarus case, it's close to 80%. And the problem is that one of the most important sectors in Russian and Belarusian economy, I think in Kazakh economy as well, is the supply of services and goods to the state and or to the state-owned corporations. And this sector is also, I would say, not entirely closed for the competition, but the competition here is limited. So there were a lot of quarrels between Russia and Belarus when the Belarusian companies, for example, Minsk tractor factory or Gomel factory for agriculture equipment, they tried to be included into the Russian, what's called Goszakas or state order, and they failed actually to infiltrate in this kind of transactions. So all these questions are quite of huge importance. Moreover, I would say that, for example, if you look on Kazakhstan, on Kazakh, for example, fuel market or gasoline market, it's also much more liberalized than in Russia. And I would say that the difference, the price differentials between Kazakh market for gasoline and the Russian market is huge. And actually what the Russians were doing for years was a postponement from 1 year to another year of introduction of a free market for energy resources. And this is actually a very, very acute problem, because the Kazakh companies can benefit a lot of supplying the Kazakh gasoline or diesel to Orenburg Oblast, to Western Siberia, or to Southern Europe and whatsoever. So in any case, I would say that from my point of view, Uzbekistan entrance to the Eurasian Union may be very interesting in a sense that it can become, I would say, a huge force a huge effort to change the rules of the game, because actually I would say very frankly that Moscow is quite interested in enlarging the sphere. And as far as we know, the Ukrainian colleagues are of course opting out of the Eurasian Union from the very beginning. The recent unrest in Belarus also questions the future for Belarusian membership. Our Armenian colleagues are quite disappointed by the Russian position in the Karabakh conflict. So I think that on the western flank, it might be more and more tensions inside the Eurasian Union. So therefore, if Uzbekistan rises as a power from the Middle Asia, from the Central Asian front, which can influence Russia to change a little bit these rules and to make it more competitive, to make it more flexible, to offer more, I would say, advantages to the new members. It can change, I think, a lot in this union, because the newcomer, any newcomer, can ask and can, make a claim for changing rules of the game a little bit. The last point I would like to make here, it's about, you mentioned in the very beginning about the labor issues. Everybody said about the migrant labor from Central Asia to Russia. It's very important, and I completely agree that this may be a very huge chance for Uzbekistan, to legalize its migrant workers inside Russia, and it would be a very good idea. But also, I wouldn't say that I would bet a lot on the high qualified labor from Russia, because actually I would say if compared to the Central European countries, the engineer work or high qualified labor force from Russia, it's extremely overvalued inside Russia, and its qualification is not so much so great as it appears from outside. So I doubt that Uzbekistan or Kazakhstan or other Central Asian republics can benefit a lot from attracting high qualified labor from Russia. It will be a very difficult issue, and I wouldn't say it will produce the results you can imagine or you hope for.
Okay, thank you. I think now we need to listen to our last panelist, representative of Kazakhstan, on the issue. And basically, we are united. I am adding the third question to the second because we run out of time. And Kassymkhan, would you please elaborate on this question of trade barriers, tariffs and non-tariffs, which Kazakhstan faced while joining the Eurasian Economic Union? We also need to make a note that Kazakhstan was the only, and Belarus was the two members that haven't been the members of WTO by the time they joined the Eurasian Economic Union. But I think you will be able to tell us more about this.
Yes, thank you, Tatyana. On the barriers, I will try not to repeat my previous speakers. So first of all, for Kazakhstan's case, one of the indirect barriers was the size of the value added tax, because in Kazakhstan it's the lowest in the union. Right now it's 12%, and as per my knowledge, for other countries is around 20%. So basically this barrier is it has an impact when this amount of tax is being repaid by the state budget to the exporters, and that can be seen as one of the supporting measures for the exports. Then another barrier connected with the financing is that within the some member countries, namely in Russia, for example, there is a stable source of funding for exporters for lower interest rates, and that also makes a good advantage for the Russian companies entering foreign markets. Again, the cheap financing from the state, which is available in Russia and Kazakhstan, is also boosting the advantages of the local companies. Then the competition level, of course, in surveys that was done for Kazakh companies, 66% or 2/3 of all companies, they pointed out on the competition level as to be a barrier because of high intensity of competition on mainly Russian market and also in Belarus. Lack of information is another indirect barrier for Kazakh businesses who is trying to do business in union member countries, and so they are not familiar with the local business community and maybe local business opportunities. Then again, the currency exchange rate fluctuations, they also posing barrier, for example, in case of Kazakhstan in 2015, when Russian ruble has been devalued. Basically the value has declined twice, and Kazakhstan Central Bank was trying to adjust the currency level, but it took the Central Bank of Kazakhstan around 10 months to adjust the level. So basically we saw that that was one of the striking examples of increased competition from Russia, and we saw a lot of Russian goods entering the Kazakhstan market for the first time. Another barrier that was already discussed is public procurement, of course. In the case of Russia and Kazakhstan, it's quite a big chunk of economy. Also sanitary and phytosanitary measures are considered to be non-tariff barriers as well. In case of Russia, I would also point out on transportation, especially the railroad tariffs. Well, this is a direct, you could say, it's non-tariff, but also can be seen as a tariff barrier in terms of moving Kazakh goods within Russia. So basically, there are still negotiations on letting Kazakhstan get the same treatment as companies in Russia. And last but not the least, I would say that given the current situation, we see that there are different anti-crisis measures in member countries. So we see that in Russia, for example, there is a direct support for businesses in order to maintain employment. In Kazakhstan, it's handing out cash to population. And so I would say that these policy measures, they also can distort this effect of the trade union. And on a positive note, I would say that as a reaction to this situation, Kazakh business has been quite active in order to lobby its interests towards the Eurasian Economic Union. And the National Chamber of Entrepreneurs at Kassymkhan, they actually initiated the creation of Business Council of the Union, through which the business problems could be addressed on intra-government level. And right now, within the National Chamber of Entrepreneurs, there is a regular commission that is comprised of leading business owners, representatives, and the government representatives in order to discuss issues that could be then elevated to the Eurasian Union Business Council. So this mechanism, so one of the lessons is that this tool was not there from the beginning as the Business Council, but it emerged eventually and very organically. And I would encourage also to new members who are joining the union to start these discussions with their local businesses beforehand and to establish this kind of mechanism. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Really very helpful. We just hope that we will not get this announcement of joining as member by surprise as the announcement was done with regards of the announcing Uzbekistan joining as an observer. and the business community will actually have time to discuss and negotiate along with the expert community. We are moving to our last question. Is like I will ask each panelist to name the 3 main advantages or disadvantages of being the member of the Eurasian Economic Union, and I will ask you to be very brief because we run out of the time. Just name briefly and tell why, and then we move to the Q&A session with the participants. Thank you, and maybe Kassymkhan, maybe we'll start with you, if you're okay with this.
Yep, sure. Thank you. So, actually, if it's okay, let me go after.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay, then we will start with Umida. No? Surprise.
Okay, well, obviously obviously it's all conditional. I mean, it's a prerequisite that if hypothetically we assume that the Eurasian Economic Union also improves and actually starts working as more effectively, then for pluses we could say for Uzbekistan specifically, it's a nuance for Uzbekistan that elimination of discriminatory excise taxes and reduction of import duties, just like with the WTO in a negotiation process. So that's a plus. The second plus, again, it's conditional, that domestic reform on non-tariff barriers, including SPS TBT, which is very important for exports of horticulture products and other products, and modernization of SPS and TBT systems, just like with WTO. And third plus, if all above mentioned are met and WTO session proceeds, and hypothetically there may be an increase in investments, but it's all conditional, of course. And for the minuses, it's obviously trade diversion limited by EU market. If exemptions under the WTO session process, Uzbekistan gets exemptions like Kazakhstan did, then rules of origin again become very important and still matter. So border checks and delays would still be present, and which undermines the freedom of movement of goods anyway. And the minus also that exports for horticulture products and processed foods will not increase automatically, subject to many controls, since the EU standards are not harmonized, not yet fully harmonized with international still. And there's still reliance on end product certification within the Eurasian Economic Union as well. So SPS measures adopted as technical regulations, which is not compliant with the WTO, and which limits and may limit, of course, prospects for development of standardization in Uzbekistan according to international standards. As was mentioned here, it's quite backwards actually in the Eurasian Economic Union. And the third minus, obviously, the investments will not increase automatically because need to improve investment climate with all above full-scale like economic and trade reform with tangible changes, and sanctions against Russia and counteract some sanctions of Russia significantly, of course, impact access to technologies and pace of development for high-tech, telecom, and other high technological industries, and may isolate Uzbekistan further from major developed countries' cooperation. And political factors still definitely play a role, and we cannot avoid that. And Russian involvement in wars in Ukraine and political unrest in Belarus and conflict in Armenia do not add to predictability and sustainability of trade policies.
Thank you, Umida. We now move to Mr. Khachatryan to elaborate on the 3 advantages and disadvantages Armenia gained when joining the Eurasian Economic Union.
Thank you, Tatyana. Thank you. And when we discussing the problem of Eurasian Union, I mean, it was before 2015. We're talking about the political situation in Armenia, because we know that many of the problems of Armenia coming from political situation, not only for economic situation in Armenia. And now when we became a member of this union, we're thinking that we maybe, with the help of the member of union, we can change the situation. We can change the situation, economic situation, and by the help of economic situation, change the political situation. But until now, it is not working. It is one of the my mind about this situation in Armenia and about the economic Eurasian Union. But the main challenges of integration of this union are, first, a weakening of the attractiveness of the economic model of Russian development as a center of attraction for integration ties in the Eurasian Union. Vladimir talking about this, and it is one of the main problems, but maybe it is not problem. Maybe it is a privileges for us, but we, the other members of without Russia will be understand that if you want work with this union, with the cooperated with all of the other countries, we sometimes we don't forget about that. Don't forget about Russia. We just remember the other countries. I mean the cooperations with Kazakhstan, Armenia, Kyrgyzstan, Kazakhstan, because we understand that all of these countries just work only with Russia, and they have a big economic connections with Russia during Soviet Union and after Soviet Union, and during became as CIA as a CIA members. But now maybe we need cooperated closely with the between countries, not only with Russia. And the second problem is bureaucratization and insufficient efficiency of supranational bodies. Because now we created Eurasian commissions, and we just thinking about cooperation for these countries, member of Union, but they're forgetting about this situation in the countries themselves. We don't forget about it. To second problem, and the last, what I mean, is the lack of real joint infrastructure projects focused on the development of industrial cooperation, support for national producers of the UAE member states. I think enough.
Thank you, thank you. I received a note from Kassymkhan Kapparov that he is ready to list his top three advantages and disadvantages. Please, Kassymkhan.
Thank you. Let me just point out on several topics that I think will be useful. One of which is just recently in May this year, there was a discussion of the highest Eurasian Economic Council, at which Kazakhstan's President Tokayev, he suggested that the Union's development strategy till 2025 should be, the adoption of this strategy should be postponed until the member countries could meet face to face. And basically, we are seeing the slowing down of the integration processes, and I would say it's inevitable, because at the beginning it was not very detailed, but as we go further, there are more and more details that are required to be defined and discussed and agreed upon. The second point I would mention is that within the Union, most of the initiatives, they are coming from Russia, because Russian business community is more advanced. They have more access to global markets, and maybe their demand for global standards is higher. So basically, we're talking about the recent initiatives connected with the product labeling. This initiative is coming from Russia, and it's very, so the business community in Kazakhstan is not very excited about this initiative, even though it started from just 2 or 3 groups of goods. But later on, the plan is to extend this product labeling. In Russian, it's called markirovka tovara. And as per evaluation of its impact on the economy. So the local business community is calculating that it would add up around 10% to the price level on these goods, and basically it will translate into the inflation. Maybe also some of the goods will not be available in Kazakhstan because of this initiative, so the global majors could withdraw from the market. And the third pain center, I would say, is that any topic which relates to subnational currency or subnational financial institution is causing a lot of allergy, both in the government of Kazakhstan and the population, because currency is seen as one of the key factors of independence and maintaining independent state policy. So any speculation or any citing of officials regarding this common subnational currency is causing a lot of stress for the population. So the image of the union is not benefiting from this kind of discussions. So that's the three main points I would bring to your attention.
Thank you very much. We I think we will do it in the following order. I will ask Kubanychbek, Sagaliev to elaborate, and we'll finish with the Vladislav and Inozemtsev. Kubanychbek, could you please list the top three topics of the Kyrgyzstan and Eurasian Economic Union?
Okay, thank you. I will talk about the positive effects. Firstly, the main positive effects may be being the member of Eurasian Economic Union. Not only we talk about the goods and services, but also a free movement of the labor, free movement of the capital, and etc. And from this point of view, topic of employment of our Kyrgyz citizens who are mostly low-skilled labor, it's very they can easily be employed on the territory of the big economies like Russia and Kazakhstan. So the topic of the employment is one of the most positive effects of the being the member of the union. Second topic is side effects. It's like indirect effect of the joining of the union is shipment of the economy from bazaar economy to the production and processing economy. This second. And third one is Russia, in order for transition period, in order to get prepared Kyrgyzstan for joining the union, they established a big Russian Kyrgyz Development Fund. It's financial institution which has very favorable interest rates for the business. This fund was established in order to make Kyrgyzstani business get prepared for the union, which in order for the Kyrgyz business to be oriented from bazaar economy to the more processing and production economy. It's a third positive effect, and the negative effect, I could say it's maybe more political issue, political topic. You know that for every country it's logical for big economy members like Kazakhstan, for Russia, for Belarus, for them to make their economy getting bigger, they will protect their own producers and their own businesses. So Kyrgyzstan, being this, it's not secret, it's one of the smallest and one of the weakest economies of the union. They can be dictated from other big players of the union. So it's this kind of political issues, political questions plays I think this major role in terms of negative effects of being the union member.
Thank you. And the last panelist for today, the last question, Vladislav and Inozemtsev, would you please conclude the event with your final notes on the advantages and disadvantages?
Okay, look, I will be brief. First of all, I would say that the minuses, yeah, the problems. First is that Russia geopolitically is now not in a very good position because the Russian leadership actually wants to go further in its confrontation with the Western powers. And so therefore it will definitely affect somehow the economic stance of the country. And all the sanctions which Russia can face will automatically, in one or another fashion, somehow to be absorbed by the Eurasian Union countries members as well. It takes from transit issues to technology issues and to many others. The second point is actually our friend Kassymkhan said about the single currency. I actually doubt it will be the case for coming 5 or 10 years. But nevertheless, the problem is that inside the Eurasian Union, the Russian ruble actually de facto is a reserve currency. And I wouldn't say it seems now to be a very strong currency at all. So Russia faces a lot of problems because of its payment balance, because of the fall in energy prices. So therefore, it's actually not very good situation when all the currencies are pegged to ruble, because it's not so so stable as, for example, the renminbi or the US dollar. The third issue, which was never mentioned here, but I think it's quite important, it's the diminishing freedom, technological freedom in Russia. Because, for example, in the recent 2 years, more than 160 measures and laws were enacted in Russia limiting the freedom of the internet. And so, therefore, the technological infrastructure in Russia may be in a state of decline. Because, for example, if one can mention, the Western companies are actually canceling the SSL certificates from the Russian internet site. For example, Russia is only one country in the world where the site of the president, the Kremlin.ru, is not secure at all without the SSL certificate, as are many of the other Russian official sites. So the Belarusian internet companies, which were actually moving from Belarus, were not moving only because of this unrest, but because they expect the new wave of Russian influence on the Belarusian internet sector. And therefore, in general, internet technology is actually endangered in any country which teams up with Russia. And the pluses, the benefits are, of course, possible extension, possible growth of exports to the Russian market. Actually, the labor movement, which was mentioned many times. And I would once again say that Uzbekistan, as a potential newcomer, definitely has some kind of political lever to influence Russia to change something, some kind of rules for itself. Because as one knows, for example, when China entered the WTO, it was very successful in promoting some kind of exceptions for itself, which were actually very beneficial for Chinese economy for years. So if Uzbekistan decides to join, I would advise its leadership just to make a lot of trade-offs with Russia as a new joining member.
Thank you. Thank you so much. We have several questions, and I think you answered them in the chat. But I will just we still have 7 minutes left before conclusion. And the first question from Nikolai Yarmov. It's our advisor, but also USAID project. If all the Eurasian Economic Union countries except Belarus are already members of the WTO, what's the different advantages of the becoming an Eurasian Economic Union member? Do we have volunteers to answer those questions? That question, because it's like, I think, to the panel.
I answered already.
Yeah, you answered already. That yeah. Could you please repeat? Or?
I can ask Tatyana Vahagn.
Yeah, sure.
Can I answer this question, because it's very interesting question? And for example, for Armenia, after when Armenia became the member of this union, the prices of energy resources became 30% than before there, when Armenia was without. And some, its same situation was for the diamonds, diamonds. When Armenia imported from Russia, it increased, the prices increased about 30%. It was very useful for Armenia, and it's very important for Armenia that you know that Armenia, for example, 100% of energy resources imported from Russia. I mean, oil of gas. It's a main reason why after they became member of this union, what's the difference between WTO? But the other problem, the other sides, the many of the goods imported from the third countries, the prices of these goods increase, but not so much. It's about maybe 1–2%. It is, and we as citizens of Armenia doesn't. It is not was very important for us as a consumers. I think it means that after this rising the tariffs, the prices did not change so much.
Thank you, thank you. We have a yes.
Just a couple. I just want to say that theoretically, ideally, RTAs, regional trade agreements, which is also EAU is also a regional trade agreement, intended to sort of even to deepen the integration, you know, compared to general WTO membership. So most, all of the WTO members are in some sort of trade agreements. Mostly it's 99%, there are over 500 RTAs in the world, 99% are free trade agreements. So EU is the only example of actually economic union, like a customs union, effectively, you know. And EAU in that sense, yes, there are some attempts in Latin America with Mercosur, there are some attempts in Africa, but they cannot compare to EU effectiveness, of course. They're not really, they also kind of failed customs union, to be frankly speaking, you know. So EAU is quite an ambitious project. And in fact, indeed, the whole idea of regional trade agreements like free trade agreements is to deepen the integration by getting into more, for example, the most cases, there are investment provisions, you know, in such FTAs worldwide. I mean, intellectual property rights provisions, or deeper sort of integration on some dispute settlement, etc., which is not present right now at the Eurasian. So we're not really taking advantage of even FTA within CIS, frankly speaking. So it's a fair question, because if we cannot even deeper have, it means that structurally our economies are, we're still like the kind of competitors. We're not really we're doing the same thing, basically, you know, instead of really integrating. So in that sense, it seems, as Vladislav already mentioned, it's more sort of a political project rather than economic.
Okay, thank you, Umida. We have another question from Gregory Gleason, the member of the American Chamber of Commerce. This is an excellent, informative workshop considering Mr. Inozemtsev and Ms. Khaknazarova observation about sanctions. Does Uzbek entry into full status of Eurasian Economic Union member imply the European and American sanctions will extend to Uzbekistan automatically, or will there be a waiver? Umida, I think it's you.
No, I don't. I think that Russian sanctions against Russia, they're not against Eurasian Economic Union. Like, for example, we already had that practice with counter sanctions of Russia for food products from EU, and of course, like other members were not, you know, agreeing to that, and Kazakhstan wanted to import as usual, and then so that they introduced actually customs control for rules of origin, you know, to avoid re-export of EU products to Russia through Kazakhstan, for example, or through Belarus. So it means that no, it's not automatically against all the members, of course it does, and I don't think it's automatic, but there is a risk that there's sort of, you know, in politics, there's also this kind of fear and risk that politically there may be isolation. You know, if there's more isolation in Russia, like more inward kind of oriented policy, there may be implications for Uzbekistan or other member states. You know, there is a risk, of course.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Umida. Do we have other? No? Okay. We had another question to Vladislav, and I think it was answered in written. I just still like make it like pronounce it. What is the conclusion in a sense of the functioning of Eurasian Economic Union? Under what circumstances it can be effective if the idea itself is doomed?
I should repeat it. So look,
yeah, I think because not everyone has, I think, seen it. If you could just repeat it, and then we'll conclude.
Yeah, the problem with the Eurasian Union actually is that it might be quite effective if the leaders of the countries decide to allow the Eurasian Commission and to the Court of the Eurasian Union just to proceed in a manner as the European Court of Justice and the European Commission proceeds, because actually the idea of integration, from my point of view, and Umida said about the European Union, is to make a framework for self-developing integration, and then actually to allow the institution of the community or of the union to go forward. And this is the biggest issue, because if integration doesn't actually produce anything except of this Council of Heads of States, it's not an integration, it's just an international grouping, nothing else. Actually, it should go by itself for at least in at least several spheres.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. I think we just need to conclude our event, and I want to thank, we learned today that, I mean, the Eurasian Economic Union is not, it's as many other integration initiatives globally, economically is not really feasible. There must be other reasons for the integration and for the creation of this union, and it's like political, social, economic, security, and others. That's why countries join. But today we were talking about economic and financial reasons for integrating. So maybe there will be another event on the other reasons of the Eurasian Economic Union existence. And I want to thank all panelists for finding time to join the discussion. Very interesting discussion indeed. I want to thank other participants for joining, and for members of AmCham, you received, and those registered received all the papers, but the others who didn't have chance to receive, just write to me, and we have the 5 research from the distinguished panelists. Thank you again so much. It was really informative, as well as reading your papers. And I think we are done for today. Thank you, and enjoy your evening or day.
Thank you.